This is a museum now, but mine headframes like this once studied the landscape here in Cornwall, the home of tin mining for 3,000 years. Now there's only one working mine left. At its peak in the 1870s, there were 350 mines and 35,000 miners. They worked in cold, wet and dangerous conditions. When accidents happened, it was fellow miners who came to the rescue. A typical shaft can be 3,000 feet deep, and it's usually divided into 3 vertical sections. The first 2 contain cages that take the miners up and down. The third, running alongside, is a service shaft that's used for hauling bulky equipment in and out of the mine. It was in just such a service shaft that 3 miners were due to carry out routine inspection. The only access was by a vertical ladder running down the shaft wall.
I'd gone to work in the morning and I'd felt a sort of premonition that something would happen that day. And in fact, it did.
It upsets you tremendously. It's not a thing you want to happen to anybody. That's unbelievable. It was unbelievable that he was still alive.
It's not the case.
For a man to come back and go down in that mine after what happened to he is a very brave man.
We all face the same hazards. We all face the same problems on a day-to-day basis. And I think as a result of this, it builds up a camaraderie that you very rarely find in any other industry.
You've got water leaking, you've got the downdraft like inside a wind tunnel. Winter time, you've got icicles hanging down. The conditions in the shaft is the sort of job that you don't hang around. If you hang around, you're shaken with a cold.
It is very dangerous, but if you're brought up in that sort of environment, you don't realise the danger. It's something that you normally get used to. That's something that grows in you.
It was a freezing January morning when 3 men began their weekly inspection of the service shaft, where they knew some work was needed.
Right. Well, this isn't looking too bad.
They were led by George Curtis, the underground manager, together with Bill Mutton, the shaft foreman, and Eddie Leake, the mine captain, all played here by actors.
What do you think, Eddie?
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon the problem's up above here.
Yeah, I know. I saw that last week. Right, well, I'm going to go up to the next level on the ladder, take a closer look. I want you 2 to follow behind in the cage, okay?
Right.
George said, I don't care. I'll go on ahead of you now. And he probably went up 30 feet while we made our way to the top of the cage.
George is right. You get his higher up.
Yeah, I'm sure it's up there somewhere. All right, let's go up.
There was no reason to believe that there'd be any problems as they made their way up to the next level. But today, a job George had done hundreds of times before would go wrong.
What was that?
God, that's George going through.
You better get down there.
Having fallen down the shaft, you never expect to find the person living again. It's a horrible feeling, horrible feeling.
My reaction then was, oh my God, he's gone. And I thought, well, we got a horrible task now.
Even not knowing whether he was alive or dead, the obvious feeling is how quick can I get to him? And the cage doesn't actually go fast enough to get to him.
It was pitch black. They'd only their helmet lamps to spot him.
There he is. On that beam.
Good God. It's not the case.
To my surprise, he was lying across the service shaft on a barren timber.
No, he looks in a bad way. And he's right on the edge.
He was moaning. My reaction then was to get there quick because I could see that he would have rolled over and gone again, which was over 1,000 feet.
I better try and get around.
All right. Look, you go upstairs and see if you can get some. All right? Okay. Watch yourself, Bill.
All right.
Eddie knew that one false move and Bill would fall too.
I think not only myself, I think Billy Mutton as well, were more than relieved that we heard just a moan from him. At least we knew he was alive.
still, you're right on the edge, all right?
While there's life, there's hope, always. If you turn with a lot of luck, yes, an amazing piece of luck.
All right, George.
If he hadn't hit those planks, he could have gone right through to the bottom of the shaft.
My first reaction was to grab him.
All right, George. I got you, mate. All right.
Bill was balancing on a slippery beam 8 inches wide. There was a 1,000-foot drop below him.
I got you.
By leaning over George, I was leaning over open shaft. And the only thing I could see was a guardrail. He's not there as a rail put there that would hold any weight. It's just nailed on. And I wasn't secure by holding on to that. And a lethal movement from George would took the two of us. So for the first 10 minutes that I spent with George, it was the worst 10 minutes of my life.
Eddie's gone up for help, all right?
Keep very still.
Within minutes, Eddie was on the surface to get help from Terry Mankey, leader of the mine's rescue team, also played by an actor.
Terry, there's been a bad accident. George has fallen down the shaft.
George?
George was a colleague and a friend.
Difficult to tell.
Obviously, I was very concerned for his overall safety, because I knew that at the end of the day, having fallen that far, that and it would take a miracle for him to be uninjured. And, at that stage, I wasn't believing in miracles.
What stopped him falling the other 1,000 feet?
Just a couple of beams. Bill's holding him at the moment.
Okay. You call the rescue team, I'll get the crash box.
Right.
My biggest worry then was, if he fall off that timber, what am I going to tell him? I was more concerned with keeping me there at all costs, because how do you explain to men that you lost them?
Okay, let's
In various mines throughout the country, there have been a number of fatalities in shafts. I have seen someone go from top to bottom, and it's not a very pleasant sight, obviously.
Meanwhile, Bill was surprised by how assertive George was being.
Your battery box.
Battery box, get it off.
Don't worry about that.
Get it off, it's
All right, mate.
I thought, well, the cocky bugger, he fell nearly 150 feet, and he's still telling me, giving me bloody orders. I thought, why don't you pass out, George, and give me a chance to secure proper?
George?
Fortunately, George did pass out, which at last allowed Bill to make himself safe.
As soon as I had got my safety belt fastened, and I could put some weight on that belt, I had 2 hands now that I could have kept them there.
God, am I glad to see you guys.
Okay, Eddie, stay put. Bill, I'm coming over.
All right.
When they did arrive and come across, my arms was dead with cold.
Okay, George. Let's look ahead.
The first thing was obviously to ensure the 3 major things. A, that he had a competent airway, a breathing function, a cardiac function.
Okay, George.
Then it was a top-to-toe survey to find the full extent of his injuries.
Let me give you something. Feel the pain.
He was given a jab to try and ease the intense pain that he was obviously suffering, bearing in mind the nature of his injuries. Because of the time factor, because of where we were, it was very difficult to get the relevant equipment to us. But we used, obviously, the better leg to splint the worst leg.
Put his arm across your chest.
And we used his own body as a splint and the appropriate bandages.
Got it? Just tie this off. Then, Bill, I want you and Eddie to change places and organise the stretcher, Bill.
The next problem was how they were going to move George onto a stretcher in such a confined space. There was no room to manoeuvre. The shaft was 6 feet by 10. And with all of the rescuers still balanced on narrow ledges, one slip by any of them would be fatal.
Keep it coming.
Yeah.
Okay. Foot round to Eddie.
Getting him on a stretcher was a major problem. The stretcher had to be initially handed across the gap to us. We had limited access to George. We had to lift him and get the stretcher under him. And the only room was literally where we were standing. We were virtually standing on where the stretcher had to be.
Are we ready? After 3. 1, 2, 3, lift!
So far, so good. But next came the most critical and dangerous part of the rescue. They'd have to manhandle George and the stretcher across the open shaft. They knew by now he had multiple injuries. Any movement at all could make them worse, but they had no choice.
1, 2, 3, lift! Gently, up we go, up we go.
Because of the situation we were in, we had to literally throw the rule book out of the window. We had to sling the stretcher across the shaft inside the cage because of the constraints of physical dimensions. The stretcher still had to be in a vertical situation until we eventually got to the surface. You know you're approaching the surface. The light changes, the atmosphere itself changes. So there's a feeling of relief that in the very near future you'll be handing on your casualty to professional ambulance service, who in turn will swiftly take him to hospital.
It had taken 2.5 hours to rescue George. He'd broken almost every bone in his body. His injuries were so severe, he spent 5.5 months in hospital. But 2 weeks after his release, he went back to work as a miner.
I suffered multiple fractures and dislocations to the body. The only limb that was unaffected was my right arm. I can remember climbing the ladder from 190 fathoms, and I remember something striking me at the back of the neck. The next thing I remember was that I was airborne. The thing that ran through my mind was that you've fallen, you've got to grab something. And just by the time I had said that, I felt a bump and I came to rest.
Another 1,000 men could fall through that shaft over that distance, and they would never come out alive.
Every step that they took, they were putting themselves at risk. And now having to think about what they were doing to keep themselves safe, in addition to rescuing me. So they had a very tricky and difficult exercise. I've got to express my gratitude for them, the way that they performed.
The amazing part of the fall was that George landed on the timber that he ordered me to take out, which I left there because they was put there for a specific reason of the ground pressure on the side of the shaft. That was one of the miracles of my life. He was a miracle in the sense that George could fall in an open shaft and fall on a piece of timber which he wanted took out.